Hello everybody. So this video is going to be a little different than my normal presentation. It's actually going to be a first for me. I'm going to be reading somebody's Reddit post basically saying that he used to work in a reverse engineering program. Well, he has secondhand knowledge of this program. And I mean, if it's fake, it's fake, but if it's not, this is some really compelling stuff. I feel like all these leaks that are coming out are just slow pieces of a puzzle that are being put together. And just like our television, there are pieces of the truth inside of these shows. I mean, a lot of these stories could be real, couldn't be real, but it's still fascinating, and I love this subject so much. And yeah, so we will begin this here right now. I have secondhand knowledge. Please note that I will be vague in some places about any identifying information, credentials, locations, people, procedures, etc. I don't want to be identified and harassed. I have a professional background in anthropology. I also have some informal experience in philosophy, which unexpectedly ended up being the most useful of my skills on this project. Previously, I worked for a university in the Western United States for cultural reasons. Students and faculty at this particular university are more likely to be selected for sensitive government work. I suspect I was selected because of my low profile, my squeaky clean history, a lack of any drug or alcohol use, my broad range of skills and knowledge related to human civilizations, and some connections that I have in academia. My most significant work has been in anthropology. Why Reddit? I'm sure you're wondering why I am posting this here instead of sending this information somewhere more important. Since the UAP hearing happened and other whistleblowers have come forward, I felt safe enough to speak out privately. I don't know how useful my testimony was, and I felt like I was brushed off, as I get into later. I don't have any documents to hand over or any first-hand experience with UFOs or ETs. I do have trust in our institutions to do their job, come to the right conclusions, and eventually begin disclosure. I have a hope that the truth will be widely known in the near future. I wasn't interested in or involved in the UFO alien phenomena prior to me starting my work. As the work progressed, I became convinced that there was something very real behind all of this. And now that I am released from the project, ufology has become a special interest of mine. I think now is a good time to put my story out there. So, the work. In early 2017, I was contacted by one of my connections at the university who urged me to apply for a position in a special research project, claiming that the project needed someone with my experience. The pay would be good and that they would help me get in. This individual helped me apply and gave me a rundown about what to expect from the hiring process. This process involved an extensive background check, applying for a security clearance, several interviews, and training for security, communication, and working with sensitive information. Going through the rat maze took several months, but I made it through much faster than anticipated and was finally ready to actually begin working in the early 2018. I was apprehensive on my first day of work. I had jumped through all the hoops, and I still didn't know what the subject of my research was. I didn't feel comfortable with all the security. I'm on the spectrum, and while I'm good at masking, procedures and bureaucracy make me confused and nervous. And while I'm good at masking, doing procedures and bureaucracy make me confused and nervous. The workday began by entering a secure facility where my identity was verified with ID and biometrics. After passing through, I would go to my workplace and have to pass through another layer of security. In the workspace, we were monitored constantly and subject to random security checks. Wow. So this is a pretty high security spot he's talking about. This is very interesting. So far it's very compelling, and I'm invested. The workspace was a medium-sized set of offices where I and 6 other researchers worked, one of which was assigned to train me. Each of these researchers had different backgrounds and were assigned to a different part of the project. Over the next few days, my trainer walked me through this research process. It was then when I finally learned what the subject of the research was. My trainer gently explained that we were working with information about an exotic intelligence, meaning a sapient, non-human species of an unknown origin. Our job was to take the information that had been provided for us from outside sources, sort it based on its content and usefulness, and in the end produce a comprehensive report that summarized what we know about this intelligence. Holy shit, that is such a cool ass job. What? Damn. With a special focus on its motivations and intentions, of course. This report could then be used to brief elected officials in the future, and even the public. We were allowed to make certain assumptions in the report, such as that these beings and their motivations could be understood by humans, and that the information we have is accurate. Interesting. And that's a concept I've honestly had when thinking about all this stuff, is like, will we even be able to understand like their perception connecting to our perception? You know? Like if they exist in a higher realm of consciousness, or if they're more consciously aware of their surroundings and who they are, that's why they're, deemed to be telepathic, because they can see that barrier that we can't see past. And if they are so much more evolved than us, their interaction would be something that we can't really process. It's a very interesting concept, and it's deep. And this goes into the idea of, these are two species or multiple species coming together. The future's gonna be wild. I had endless questions and became distraught. And I think they could tell, because my trainer figured it would be best if I was given time to myself to read some of the material and digest the information. As I learned more, the shock faded and my fear was replaced with curiosity. Well, that's reassuring. Okay. A lot of the work wouldn't be very interesting to the members of this sub. The average workday consisted of going through security, getting permission to retrieve certain documents, then organizing and annotating the documents. Much of the documents were only related to the subject in tangential ways. And didn't convey very much of use. In a sense, we were separating the wheat from the chaff and getting the material ready to be used for the project. After finishing, we would secure the workplace and leave. Over the months that followed, we slowly built up a corpus of useful information. So fucking fascinating. So basically they have a bunch of different organizations giving them all the information they have on these beings, and then they have to go through it and then decide, okay, we know what this race wants, what this race wants. These guys are most prone to doing this, these guys are most prone to doing that. So far this is amazing, and it's very detailed, and I can't help but think it's real. I obviously do not have the report with me, and it has been a while, but I will now relate to you the most important information that I can recall related to these beings. Feel free to ask questions. Note that I worked the most on information related on their society and motivations. Here we go. Let's find out what these beings are all about. I'm ready. Okay. Origins. We know more about every other aspect of these beings than we do about where they actually come from. We do have some tentative ideas and speculation, but multiple hypotheses are still on the table, as I'll get into later. There is good evidence that life on Earth and these beings share a common ancestor. Our job is to keep an open mind and let the evidence lead the way instead of falling for our own pet theories or cultural prejudice. The extraterrestrial hypothesis makes some sense, but it's not the only option. During work, my colleagues often called them aliens or ETs. In the interviews I've read, the interview subjects are vague, absurd, contradictory, or evasive when asked about their origins. Perhaps this is because we aren't in a position to understand where they come from, or perhaps there are problems with communication. Maybe they simply don't want us to know. Now, this makes sense because there's been talk of them having an interdimensional aspect to them, like they come from another dimension, right? And maybe we can't really understand that, but I feel like we could, right? I don't know. It's just very fascinating. Maybe there's a layer that we can't, like they come from the actual substance of the universe itself that is observing itself. And so it creates beings to observe beings that are observing itself, right? I mean, who knows? That would be pretty wild, honestly. So, appearance and biology. In regards to the appearance of the ETs, UFO mythology is dead on. Generally, they look like diminutive humanoids with large heads, reduced facial features, and very large eyes, which are sometimes covered in a transparent black film. Earlier specimens usually do not have the film. Later specimens do. Their average height is 5 feet tall. They have 2 long arms and 2 legs. They have 3 long fingers and an opposable thumb. So 4. They have feet with 4 toes. They may have fingernails and toenails, but not always. When they do, they are molted and dark. Interesting. They have no reproductive organs or anus, and they secrete waste through their skin, similar to how we sweat. They ingest liquid food just like we do. They wear clothing, usually in the form of a very thin blue or gray colored garment, as well as boots. Wow. So that's a common thing that was thought, the EB that we had, they fed it frozen strawberry ice cream, which is pretty wild. But I always look in films and stuff, when the aliens have 4 fingers, and I think like, okay, they're giving us that information. This stuff is all so heady, honestly, and like when I conceptualize it and like internalize it, it trips me out a little bit, like an actual extraterrestrial race, It's so fascinating. Scary, but like exciting. So, their heads are large, as mentioned before. In some individuals, they are pronounced ridges on the head and upper back, which seem to relate to different kinds of implants in a way that is not understood. So that was a description by the kids from Virginia, where these beings had like horns on their head or like little nubs, but on their back too. That's very interesting. And these could be like the implants that we find in the bodies from the Mexican hearing with those mummies, the Nazca mummies. They have osmium plates in their chest, which is one of the rarest metals in the world. And you have to dig miles underground to get it. And we use it because of its connective ability to electronics. We use it in satellites and phones and other things. So it would make sense that these things are some sort of like biometric communicator that can connect with an interface, you know. So cool. Let's see. Large heads, different kinds of implants in a way that is not understood. As far as we can tell, every individual has an artificial lattice woven through their brain and nervous system. I'll get into that later. No two individuals look exactly alike. Head shape, eye shape, and size. The patterns are protrusion. The patterns and protrusions of the ridges and skin color vary between individuals. So that's interesting. So they're not all like a copy clone of one another. It seems like there's some substance or what's the word I'm looking for? Dang, brain fart. They're not all the same. So let's see. Color vary between individuals. Life on Earth and the ETs share the same kind of biochemistry. They are made of cells, use DNA, proteins, etc. They can be studied and understood with the same principles that we use to study life on Earth. This has fed into speculation about their origins. The most conservative hypothesis is that they share our biochemistry because they also originate from Earth. But there are other theories. Life on Earth and wherever they came from, could both be descendants from a common ancestor, like panspermia. Perhaps life everywhere in the universe shares the same biochemistry. Now see, that's an interesting concept right there. Like, what if space is just like a milky thing of life-producing matter that we can't really understand, like dark matter, like life actually propagates out of it depending on where it lands? Or what if this life is just the same as another piece of life somewhere out in the universe that came here on an asteroid or comet dust? You know, a comet passes us really close and it just clouds us with like this nebula of dust that rained down on Earth, and then we came. So fascinating. You know, they say the first life on Earth was fungus. You know, and what if, depending on how the fungus, you know, because when you take mushrooms, you connect, and it's like this mycelium intergalactic web where it gets information from like the dark matter, and whatever life on Earth, whatever kind of life on Earth could be produced, that is what became, because fungus is such a, you know, a rigid organism. It can survive virtually anywhere. I don't know, that was just speculation. So the striking similarities between their anatomy and human anatomy leads me to wild speculations about whether the individuals we see are specifically designed to resemble humans in order to facilitate interactions. There is a small collection of biological matter that has been retrieved from craft that shares no resemblance to humans and defies description. This material is like a web of nervous tissue, which is interlaced into the structure of the craft itself. Okay, so like some sort of mycelium, some sort of, you know, web of life. That's so cool. And another theory about these beings is that they're designed by the ancient Anunnaki, who inhabited Earth about 30,000 years ago. I got a video on that. You can check it out. JK. So let's see. Structure of the craft. But that's crazy. So material that was actually connected to the craft itself, like some sort of interface, like a living. I've thought that these craft are living. It makes sense. Well, it does make sense, but it seems plausible. So, technology. Before I mention an artificial lattice, which is integrated into the nervous system. This lattice is at the heart of their technology. In interviews with subjects, they demonstrated the ability to communicate with and detect the presence of others of their kind in the same facility, in different rooms. Tools retrieved from craft would be responsive to the touch of an intentions would be responsive to the touch and intentions of the ETs, but would be totally inert in the hands of human operators. This lattice is probably what makes these abilities possible. It is made of ordinary elements like copper and aluminum, and there is no discernible reason why it should be able to do what it seems to do. Interesting. So this seems to me like they're able to transmit their essence, maybe their connection, like how crystals can connect to us or how they allow us to heal. Maybe they're connecting to these things because they're very, conductive. You know, it reminds me a lot of like the pyramids. The pyramids were lined with metal and energetic stones that we think that they were a machine, but for us, it seems like there's, how would this work? But for them, maybe they are able to access something else that was able to interact with these structures. Alrighty, let's see. Seems to do. We were allowed access to documents that describe the capabilities of their craft, as well as eyewitness encounters, but we were not allowed any data that would explain how their propulsion system worked, or about anything regarding the reverse engineering of the craft. Of course, compartmentalization. The reasoning behind this is obvious. The special interest involved have begrudgingly begun to accept that disclosing the existence of the intelligence is necessary over the long term. But the one thing they refuse to do is relinquish their monopoly over exotic technology. I don't have much insight to give about the craft because the project focused more on the extraterrestrials themselves, their society, and implications for our society. The craft have a wide range of appearance, size, and behavior. It seems like each craft is designed for a specific purpose. Every craft is different, but they can be grouped based on shape and purpose. There are some edge cases that won't fit into this neat category. Group based on the shape and purpose. It seems like each craft is designed for a specific purpose. Each craft is different, but they can be grouped based on shape and purpose. There are some edge cases that won't fit into this neat categorization. Okay. There are hundreds of objects in orbit that are likely created by this intelligence. At first glance, they look like commonplace space debris, but on rare occasions they will move in a way that is not attributed to gravity, meet with other object, or expel an object. Tracking these is very difficult, and we know very little about them, including their size. So I guess they're allowed data and access to, space radar, but not propulsion and stuff like that. I guess, yeah, if you could see how they behaved, you would be able to kind of like get a little bit more insight into what they are, what they're doing. So that makes sense. Attribute gravity, tracking these is very difficult. The most commonly seen objects are large reflective orbs or pills that move at high speeds. Usually, they are only seen for a second, but on other occasions, they follow aircraft, hover over sensitive locations, move in strange, illogical ways, and even suddenly disappear. At night, these orbs sometimes emit orange light, although other colors can also be seen. These objects have been seen submerging into the ocean as well as other bodies of water. There are egg-shaped craft which move in more predictable ways. Although they move much faster than man-made craft, we were allowed to have a lot of information related to these. These craft are the most likely to fail. Interesting. And they are manned. Biological material and even living organisms have been recovered from these craft. These are the most interesting to me, as they contain occupants, living spaces, and large rooms full of equipment. We speculate that these are surveyors or scientists. In one particular case, a craft of this kind contained samples of Earth biota. There are no control panels or any kind of obvious mechanism for controlling the craft. This kind of craft has unfortunately become more uncommon over time. Wow, so it's like they have, a shuttlecraft, kind of like Star Trek. They take the shuttlecraft. Hey, we're gonna go out and go check this place for a few days. They get there, they like hide in their cloaked craft, and I guess sometimes they malfunction, and that's why you're able to see, just like a hovering spaceship chilling, and they're like, oh shit, they're looking this way. Kind of like that Star Trek episode. It's very, very interesting. Living quarters. I wonder what those look like. Do they have bed? Do they have books? I don't know. What do they do for fun? Do they listen to music? Do they access some sort of like virtual reality that we can't see, but they are existing in as well, and then like come here for work? Fascinating. Okay. The classic flying discs and cressids have the greatest present in popular culture, but they are not the most common objects. These are speculated to be stealth vehicles that are used for reconnaissance and research. On many occasions, these have landed completely empty. Oh. So maybe like a disc that just goes out and, researches or does reconnaissance, and then they're like, yeah, we don't need it, you could just leave it. Or it could be like a little seed for us to grab so that we can maybe learn how it's like completely devoid of anything, and like, hey, if these monkeys figure it out, good for them, they can have it. So, the interviews. Because of my past work experience, most of my work on the report was related to actual interviews that had taken place with ETs. They were retrieved from crashes, but also from landings, where the craft seemed to have landed on purpose and the beings came voluntarily. Interesting. Reading these was very surreal, and I suspect the context of these interviews is part of the reason for so much secrecy. The way that they were treated was inhumane and very unethical. See, that's one of the main things right there that just pisses me off, because I know they probably had them chained up and like, just the worst conditions. Gosh, I feel so bad for them. All right. The ETs have a very close relationship with their technology. They cannot survive very long while separated from their craft and from each other. They can't eat anything other than a special kind of liquid food, and human-made substances were not sufficient replacements. Throughout their stay on Earth, they would suffer from malnutrition and a kind of toxic buildup in the body. Because of how vulnerable they were, every effort was taken to keep them alive and conscious, even against their wishes. The situation reminded me of the case of Hisashi Auchi. I guess that's some guy who got treated bad. Something that deeply frustrated me was that they seemed to want to show us so much more, but because of the irresponsible behavior of the program, they could not. They were separated from their craft permanently, so the craft could be hauled off elsewhere and auctioned off, and so that the program would have total control over the interview process. Because of this separation, the ETs would slowly die. Communication took place through telepathy. They could read our thoughts and send thoughts and impressions into our mind. However, this takes a lot of concentration on the part of the interviewer, and communication would break down as the health of the consciousness of the subject declined. The interviewer and the ET would communicate telepathically. Then the interviewer would say the exchange out loud for it to be recorded. Wow. It's so fascinating. I'm so sorry if you guys are listening and my nose is kind of clogged up. If you made it this far, I guess let me know and then I'll redo it maybe. This is a long video so far, 32 minutes, god damn. Okay, this is a podcast. Here we go. Society and motivations. From reading interviews with detained subjects, I and other researchers were able to put together a rough picture of how this species works and why they are here. Instead of having any kind of formal social structure, these beings from a dynamic superintelligence, these beings form a dynamic superintelligence that is a composite, of all their minds. That is a composite of all their minds. Reproduction doesn't take place biologically. Instead, they are artificially created, with each one designed for a specific purpose as their society has need. The intimate interlinking of their minds causes them to behave as one superorganism rather than individuals. So it's kind of like the Vulcans. You know, in Star Trek, they don't have any Greys, and the Greys do sound a lot like Vulcans. So what if that was, Star Trek's way of giving us the truth without giving us the truth, It'd be interesting if their society is similar to the Vulcan world. Let's see. To get into why they are here, we have to understand their philosophy. Philosophy is a human word made for human context, so it may not be appropriate to use that label, but I will use it anyway. They have a mosaic reductionist ontology, which bears heavy similarities to cosmopsychism or objective idealism. As far as I can tell, their philosophy is naturalistic, but has some elements that could be misconstrued as religious. They reduce time, space, and everything to behavior of a single unitary consciousness. I'm so sorry, my nose. Jeez. Okay. Not to be confused with the superintelligence that I mentioned earlier. The consciousness behaves entirely spontaneously without deliberation or forethought. So, and everything to the behavior of a single unitary consciousness. So like the everything and nothing, the one thing. This consciousness behaves entirely spontaneously without deliberation or forethought. So it just happens. So we're just a thing that became. I wonder if we're connected to this. According to them, the minds of living organisms are parts of this consciousness that has looped in on itself, creating separation and individuality. The process of evolution has caused some organisms, such as ourselves, to develop higher cognitive facilities and mental complexity, which allows for complex thought and self-reflection. Our perceptions are the mental activity of this unitary consciousness, as it is filtered through our minds and presented in a way that is most advantageous to our survival as individual loops. We modeled the patterns of our observations as the laws of physics, but the laws of physics have no inherent existence except as the patterns of this universal mental activity. Wow. So like if we were evolving, like let's say octopuses, they've evolved, they can change their color, their texture. And how do they do that? Well, that's just how they evolved in the realm that they were at to survive. So fascinating. I love this kind of thought experiment. So let's see. They believe that as life continues to grow and complexify, it will have an effect on the unitary consciousness that constitutes the universe. As life proliferates and complexifies, it will cause it to attain higher cognitive functions and eventually reach self-awareness. They believe that the universe is already blindly striving towards self-awareness and complexity, and they seek move it along, so to speak. And they seek to move it along, so to speak. This is their goal. and it's presumably why they are here on Earth. They are guiding the development of life on this planet to help serve this end. I have no clue why they are so motivated to move toward this goal, or what the actual implications would be if they succeed. It also leads to other questions. If any of this is true, time itself is merely a construct created by this unitary consciousness. So, how could it change and develop? How does this universe's consciousness fragment into individual minds? And what relationship does this have to biology and the origin of life? These are all, fascinating questions. They are not afraid of dying because they believe that death is just a process where individuality breaks down and the mind unloops and becomes reintegrated into the unitary consciousness. They believe that memories and life experiences are reabsorbed into the consciousness during this process. Perhaps this is the mechanism that allows it to develop. Whether or not this is true, it seemed to bring them a lot of peace during their tormented final moments. Even in death, they served their purpose. This is very fascinating because that's exactly my thoughts right there. I think that when you die, you become part of the everything again, and you remember everything, and then maybe you get to pick and choose if you're coming back. I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to learn from these beings, I think. Their philosophy shapes the way their society is organized in profound ways. They have intentionally designed their technology in a way that integrates the mind and obscures individuality. They do not fear death and even embrace it when they have fulfilled their purpose. They have a positive attitude towards living organisms and ecosystems because the flourishing of life is integral to them achieving their goals. However, they do not respect individuality, and they see individuals, including themselves and species, as expendable in the service of their goal. In the interview, they voice concern with the impact that humanity is having on life on this planet, but also see us as a step in a process of complexification. They are definitely moderating how life is developing on this planet, and it is very probable that they are subtly manipulating it to serve their goals. The similarity between their biology and ours makes me wonder whether they seeded Earth with life to begin with. Maybe this planet has been their project from the beginning. My thoughts on disclosure. I've been keeping up with this topic for a while now, and despite recent events, I feel very optimistic about disclosure. This isn't the kind of thing that can be kept a secret forever. They are here to stay, and a secret this large can only keep for so long. None of the information, at least none that I learned during the project, is anything that would threaten civilization or cause a mass panic. People are much more resilient than that. The cat is clawing its way out of the bag, and I don't think it's going to be forced back in without tremendous effort. The important thing is that ordinary people like you keep putting up resistance and support whistleblowers. I hope that the report I helped to write eventually gets out to the public. Me and my coworkers put a lot of effort into writing it. So this is fascinating. So I guess this is just one being that was, or one race of beings that was being interviewed. And apparently there are like 20 different races. So I'd love to see, there has to be other people than working on these projects, but they just have another race. And I wish we could learn about them too. But over and all, that was an amazing report. I don't know if I 100% believe it, or maybe these guys were just trying to post something to keep, the spirit of this alive. Yeah, this is all just incredible and amazing, for real. And I hope I make contact one day, or you know what, I hope the entire world makes contact. I hope they realize that this is the step that needs to be taken, and they just allow themselves to be known. And it sucks too if well, this is just one race as well, and we just only know what this race is like. But if they are a peaceful race who think of, achieving a single goal, they might not have the means to protect themselves, right? So they know that if they just completely outright show themselves, then, they could be murked, or more people would die than what they want. And yeah, that sucks that the way this has all been handled has just been in such secrecy, since the start. And even like we had the opportunity to just let this out of the bag. When Roswell happened, they initially said flying saucer lands in Rancher's Yard. And then like 5 hours later, they take it back. And they're like, yeah, it was actually just a weather balloon, guys. Nothing to see here. Keep it moving, keep it moving. And then since then, it's just been like leak after leak after leak. People have tried to get the information out, and all while all these companies who have this material are just ripping technology out of it. They're, creating better, more powerful weapons, and who knows what kind of manipulation they're doing subconsciously. Like that's why I think that people, if you bring this up to anybody, they initially are like, well, okay, so what? This is literally the biggest moment in human history. Like, we're about to pop. Like, from 6,000 years ago, before the Younger Dryas impact, we may have known back then, too. Who knows? The aliens may have destroyed us, or no, it said that they protected us. But, if their goal was to, progress our complexity, then they would have loved the race who was here before. Possibly they weren't able to stop whatever happened, so they try and share information. Or I know that they dug holes in the ground so that we could survive, like Darren Kuyu, or maybe we did that. They're said to be the ant people who helped. It is fascinating. It's like, why don't you guys just genetically engineer a human looking being, and then present yourself, land in a spacecraft, and come out as a human? Maybe that's what the Nordic people were. They're actually genetically engineered humans. But then apparently there's the mantis race. This is all so amazing, and I hope we find out more and more as time goes on. And I'm making this basically because I feel like this stuff just has to get out, and I wanted to know about it, so I felt like I would just share it. If anybody watches it, I don't know. I'm just trying to get better at making content, honestly. But yeah, so if you guys enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos. Much love. Peace out.